Hey, how's it going, beautiful people? My name's Jib, and while we wait for my holy grail to arrive, I think it's a good time to take a look back at the first figure I bought this year, who just so happens to be
Black Transformer Jazz.
What's cracking my
otherwise known as Masterpiece Movie Jazz. But before we begin, consider liking, subscribing, and commenting if you like what I do. And okay, I'll be honest, this isn't exactly the masterpiece. It's actually a one-to-one KO of the official version by Black Mamba or AOE Mech or whatever legal pseudonym they go by. Cause the thing is, it's so perfectly knocked off that if it weren't for a couple minor details like the visor being this transparent blue instead of a smoky gray, alongside some other random paint apps my deteriorating eyesight just couldn't catch, I honestly would have been convinced I had the official version had it not been for the aforementioned differences, because there barely are any. Like these crazy bastards even painted the Pontiac logo. Cause usually when I buy MPM knockoffs, it's mainly for the improved paint job, as the MPM line has been rather inconsistent, delivering either a serviceable paint job or trash. But this time around, the paint budget was high enough for Jazz to be completely slathered in this beautiful metallic silver from head to toe, with smaller accents of gold and copper, leaving no room for improvement from a fourth-party company, as Hasbro and Takara really knocked the original out of the park. But because the original was so good, the aftermarket prices started reflecting that positive reaction by having him double and quadruple in price, leading me to buy this KO not for the paint, but because of the price, which was around $60, not cheap, but a little cheaper than the official one. Anyways, enough yapping, here's Masterpiece Movie Knockoff Jazz. And I feel like I've talked enough about the paint, so let's move on to the sculpt, as once again Hasbro and Takara did a banger job capturing his look from the movie, as the sculpt work on every inch of this figure is beautifully defined and complemented by small accents of paint. Like the face, where small accents of paint can be found everywhere except on his small beady eyes, which would have definitely benefited from some paint, as they're made out of the same translucent plastic as the visor, causing them not to pop as much, but still are wonderfully sculpted. And I think it's also a good time to point out that Jazz here also has this cool flip-out visor gimmick that doesn't compromise the sculpt work like on Bumblebee or Optimus, so that's awesome. But by far the most surprising aspect of the figure has to be his back, as it's not only sculpted to be accurate to the movie, but also picked out with the same metallic silver, copper, and gold that appear everywhere else. Cause for the front, it's pretty much expected for it to look nice, and yeah, Jazz definitely does look nice, but for them to go above and beyond for the back, and his ass, it definitely did surprise me, and made me reconsider whether Starscream really was the best MPM, which he still is. So considering how accurate everything is, that kind of brings me to my biggest yet forgivable nitpick with the robot mode, which has to be the massive shoulders, which aren't accurate and have been done better by other versions, like the Human Alliance, the 07 Deluxe, and more recently the Studio Series, but those did sacrifice the back, unlike my boy here. So like I said, it's a forgivable nitpick, especially when we see the amount of articulation he has, cause Jazz can pose if you haven't noticed. Cause he has the signature dogshit MPM head articulation with some extra hinges because of the transformation, and those definitely help spice things up. Ball joints on these spoiler thingies. Shoulders that have a little bit of a backwards butterfly because of the transformation, that are on a double joint that swivels in the middle that's then connected to an additional swivel at the end. Goddamn. Bicep swivel and a double jointed elbow that can barely do a 90-degree bend. But at least the fingers are individually articulated with pins at two different points with a hinge at the wrist. At the waist he has a ratchet with a limited amount of detents, but it gets the job done. And at the hips, the side skirts lift up to reveal universals that go out, to the back, to the front, and even drop down for additional articulation, which is very nice. Thigh swivel. Double jointed knees that bend forward and backward that much, with more range unlocked if you untransform it a bit. And lastly, a pivot and tilt at the foot. Considering Jazz does transform, I think the articulation he has is nothing short of perfect for the character, as some of the limitations he has are kind of forgettable once you start posing him, because the engineering combats the limitations by adding more joints to one area to make up for the weaker parts, like the shoulders and elbows. As for his accessories and one more gimmick, Jazz includes a small rubber Sam holding the cube in a running position with some okay sculpt that looks generally alright but is definitely lacking in the paint like the original, but it's nothing I can't fix myself. Also included is his gun, which is beautifully painted and hinges like this, mainly for the vehicle storage, which we'll get into in just a minute. But for Jazz to hold, it just slides over his fingers in a plethora of ways as long as his fingers are configured like this. And don't worry, it's a surprisingly solid connection. And lastly, his best accessory in my opinion has to be his spinal cord, which is made out of the same rubber as Sam and also painted in a brighter silver, but it could once again be my deteriorating eyesight. And to attach this, you have to come here to the back, where you'll find this button, where you then have to just push down while simultaneously tearing apart Jazz.
You want to pay? No! I want to!
Then you just connect the spinal cord with the wires facing forward and you're set. And that looks beautiful in the most twisted ways imaginable. So how about some size comparisons? Cause here he is with my Flame Toys Leo Prime, my custom Desperado, and it's not accurate, but he can do the thing better than my actual MPM Megatron. And lastly, my 2007 Autobot cast, and I can't stress how much happiness I feel just looking at these guys together, cause I don't care if they're a centimeter off anymore, as the fact that they look amazing individually and especially together overshadows any complaints I used to have. But now it's time for the transformation, which is a pain to film, so if you haven't at least, like the video please. Anyways, the transformation on Jazz is incredibly involved as every single car piece visible in the robot mode is the actual car piece, so everything has to move around itself in a series of hinges and fold-out panels, with the chest even doing this elaborate double or triple spin just like the movie, which is wild that they included. But it all culminates into a beautiful Pontiac Solstice, which I might have said wrong because I'm not really a car guy. But even then, I can appreciate this thing and how beautiful it looks, with its tinted windows and glossy black highlights that got lost in the robot mode, but became more prominent here, and of course that silver color scheme, which might be a shade lighter than the movie, but I don't really care, it looks nice. But something to note is that both side view mirrors kept falling off a lot, so I had to super glue them in, which isn't a complaint but a little caution for the people who are very prone to losing small things. Now, if you think I'm transforming all my MPMs for a comparison that might be less than 30 seconds, then you're goddamn right I will. Cause here he is with the rest of the 2007 cast and they look perfect. Just perfect. Okay, in conclusion, considering this guy and the official are so similar, if you see either one of them, for an affordable price of course, just know they have my stamp of approval, if it matters anyway. And with that, I'll see you guys next week. Thanks for watching.